environment to have a sip of something. This is one of my trusty weather mugs. It has water in it. And just kind of, hang out and talk. So I don't know, Min Castle, if you want to say anything, or if people just want to throw out a question and, we can informally start answering it.
Yeah, why don't we do quick introductions real quick in case people don't know who we are. If Ashley, you want to go ahead and go first? Because
Okay.
I'm sorry, your picture's on the very left, so I just assumed maybe you want to go.
Sure. So my name is Ashley. I just graduated Virginia Tech with my master's degree in May. I just moved to Tucson, Arizona about 3 weeks ago, which is a huge change, but it's the monsoon season, so it's all good here. Storms are plenty. I currently work from home for a really small private weather company, and then I also just got picked up as a freelance weather contributor to the Arizona Daily Star newspaper. So,
Great.
Congratulations.
Awesome.
Yep, so life is good.
Nice. Very good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Who wants to go next?
I was going in order, so Castle's next.
Oh. Okay. My name's Castle Williams. I'm a second-year master's student at University of Georgia. I guess my background is in geography and psychology as well as atmospheric sciences. So I have the background for both social science and physical science, but I lean more social science just because it's the thing that I enjoy the most. But yeah, that's me. Next.
Min.
Hello. My name is Minh Phan. I am a first-year master's student at East Carolina University. So I'm just fresh off the undergraduate boat, I guess. Woo! And school's in day 2. So we finished up day 2 today, and we're going to day 3. But I'm learning the adventures of what it takes to be a grad student. And my interests are also meteorology, geography, but also leaning more towards that social science aspect of it as well. So.
Awesome. Robert, do you prefer Robert or Rob?
Robert, please.
Hey, Robert.
Yep, my name is Robert Gottlieb. My background's in meteorology. I got a bachelor's in that from Cornell, master's from Oklahoma, finished up a master's in geography from South Carolina, and I've been home for a couple months, and I'm on the job search. I did the WSIS workshop in 2011, so that kind of served as a good introduction to weather and society for me.
Great.
Are there other people trying to sign in? People join in?
We've been monitoring, but I don't see any more messages or comments on the Facebook group at the moment.
Okay. I don't know. I see other people on the Hangout page saying they're going to watch. So.
Yeah, they might be watching. They may not want to participate, but if they do, they have the option of, I guess, giving us their email so we can invite them to it. Yeah, but we're probably having some people watch it right now.
I'm not sure if there's a way to chat without actually being in the Hangout. I thought it was something we wanted.
Yeah, I think you can just post on that main event page. This is the first time we've done this.
Okay. Right.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, I only saw the chat after I signed into the invite.
Yeah, no problem. And I guess I should introduce myself just in case. So, hi everyone. I'm Gina Eosco, and I was just telling Min and Castle I'm on the flip end of all of this, having just finished my PhD about a year ago, actually, I guess a little under a year ago. Did a postdoc at Cornell, and now I like to say I've got a big professional job now. I work for Eastern Research Group as a senior social scientist doing a lot of wonderful work for the National Weather Service, and I get to mentor folks and just help facilitate a dialogue about weather and society, and check in with all of you, and this is such a privilege. So thank you all for joining us. So to that I say, I don't know, Min or Castle, do you have any...
Castle, start rounding them off. Go for it.
So I kind of came up with kind of loose topics for us to discuss, just to kind of kick things off. So some of us were just at the AMS Community Meeting, so I didn't know if we wanted to go around and give some thoughts maybe to those who weren't able to attend, or things that stood out, or things that really you want to discuss from the social science perspective or from the physical science perspective, and just hear what everyone has to say. So I don't know who wants to start, but
I'll go ahead and just give a little idea of it. So we had the AMS Summer Community Meeting in Raleigh. What was that, about 3 weeks ago? And that kind of brought together a lot of different folks from the weather enterprise, from water and wind, folks in the private industry, to people in the academic area, and people who were a part of a lot of different organizations, like out in Oklahoma, and like Sims and all those people. So we all kind of came together, and we tried to have a conversation throughout the conference, like the 2 or 3 days that we had it, talking about the different issues that will be affecting our enterprise in the future. We had ideas talking about collaboration, working together. We had ideas about empowerment and really empowering people to make a change and make a difference. And there are definitely a lot of different talks that we all went to that were very interesting as well. But a sense of what I got from it was definitely working together in collaboration and being creative and working to include, again, that social science aspect that is really now becoming to the forefront of folks in meteorology. That's my quick spiel.
Yeah, I can add to that. I think this is a really exciting time to be at the intersection of weather and societal impacts or social science, regardless of whether you're formally in the social science community or whether you still want to remain sort of on the more meteorology, physical science side. I think there's such growth right now in the intersection, and I think we've had a lot of pioneers that have sort of helped us get to this place. But I see the Weather Service taking things really seriously and integrating social sciences and concepts of societal impacts into their operations, into their future studies. You can see it in long-term planning within the agency. You know, one of the questions that I brought up at the meeting, and I've really been pondering it a lot afterwards too, is we tend to focus a lot on social science in the government, but I often wonder what can we do to sort of integrate more social science into the private sector weather industry, or how we could expand the weather industry in terms of considering societal impacts or incorporating more social science. And it's a tough question because I think some companies do, but sometimes it's proprietary, so you can't always share and you can't always know everything that each company is doing. I want to know, though. I'm such a researcher. I want to collect all the data. And sometimes that data is just simply proprietary. So yeah, I agree, Min. I think it's a really exciting time for this intersection. Castle, what do you think?
no, and I completely agree. I thought it was a good meeting to go to. I went in with it with a lot of thoughts about the meeting. We're going to be in maybe smaller groups talking about different ideas or different things that we see going on now, and it really wasn't the case. It was still more of that 15-minute presentation format, which I guess is good and bad, but there were some sessions that tried to alleviate that and reduce the amount of time that the presenters had.
Yeah.
But I still think that like different kinds of structure or different creative ideas could have been fostered more if we were in maybe breakout sessions or some type of smaller groups that included both social scientists and physical scientists to actually sit down with each other and talk about these things.
Yeah, I think that was a really... Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I think that was a really good point that I believe somebody made towards the later session, was the idea that, you know, you could definitely tell there was like a separation of ideas and ideologies with the so-called physical meteorologists, right, and the social scientists in the room. There was that kind of divide, but we always want the idea that we will be working together for the common good. And that divide is natural. The way that people think is going to be different. The way that we conduct our business is going to be different too because of the way we were taught to think and the way everything is just different. So one idea that somebody had was to pair up physical and social scientists together and kind of have an activity, lack of a better word, you're forcing them to talk to one another. And you put them together in a small group, give them a topic or something to talk about, a problem maybe to talk about, and they have to, but there are two completely different ways of finding a solution, have to find a solution to that problem or idea. So in other words, giving them kind of like an icebreaker event, get them to mingle with one another, because sometimes you do see we're all sitting kind of separately. We're not really sitting together. The social scientists are sitting together. We're also sitting together. It's just the way it works, right? Say what?
We didn't mean to do that.
No, no, no. But you know, that's how things naturally happen. You know, and so it would be, I think, in the future, in a summer community meeting or something like that, to definitely maybe try some new ideas instead of sitting there for an hour and listening to a 15-minute talk followed by another 15-minute talk and asking questions. Maybe change up the format and really push for people to talk with one another, because you know, as much as I appreciate sitting there for 15 minutes and getting good information, sometimes it really is PowerPoint to death. You know, like you're sitting there, you're PowerPointed out, you can't really focus, you don't really have any good quality questions or feedback. But if you are interactive, I think it can definitely work to the advantage of everybody.
Yeah, I just want to say that Susan Jasco commented on our page and said, I think it is also an exciting time because the weather enterprise seems to be on the cusp of reorganizing itself and reconstructing its models. And I think that's really true, Susan. I think there's a lot of motivation here to integrate social science in a variety of ways. And I think it's hard. I think even the structure of a meeting it is hard, right? I mean, there's social science about meetings.
Sure.
You know, there's a subset of sort of group communication and organizational communication, and sometimes we forget that there's even a science to an agenda, and how you formulate that agenda can really change the productivity and the type of communication that occurs. And so we're even seeing sort of social science integrate our the structure of our own meetings, which I think is kind of exciting. For those that weren't at the summer community meeting, have you been to any interesting meetings lately? Have you had any interesting findings or questions that you'd like to raise or bring up? I'm going to grab my power source too.
I did have one question. So I really wanted to go to that meeting just because it was so close to my actual home, but I was all the way across the country, so I was pretty upset about that. But if there was one maybe talk or specific topic that I guess this is directed at everyone who went, that really stuck out to you, or one that maybe caused the most interaction afterwards, could you talk a little bit about just some of the topics that were there for those of us who weren't?
Minh and Castle, I think I'm going to bat that to one of you because you guys were taking wonderful notes.
I think Castle and I are both kind of, we know what that topic is in our head. Do you want to take it, Castle, or do you want me to do it?
Go ahead.
All right, I'll try to take a swing at it. So there's an idea from some folks at I believe Sims, right, where they're working with the facets idea. So that you're gonna have to remind me the acronym or what it stands for. I'm terrible with acronyms. But
continuum. The C is continuum and the T is threats. Yeah. Forecasting a continuum.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Of environmental threats and something.
So the idea, pretty much of acronyms aren't. We'll figure it out later. No worries. But the
it's forecasting a continuum of environmental threats. That's right. You got it.
There you go.
There you go.
All right. Sweet. All right. So the idea for that project is to kind of take what we do now with different situations where it comes to short fuse, quick, high impact events like maybe a tornado. And the idea is there's certain objectives to it. So one objective is to give people more lead time when it comes to tornadoes. Really working through the science of tornado genesis and everything to kind of elevate the amount of time you have for tornado warning. That's kind of one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is the constant changing of probabilistic information. They really want to take a lot of probabilistic information and give it out to the folks in the public, so then you kind of know or have an idea of, like, they use a graph and they were at AMS in Atlanta, I believe, too, and a few other conferences too. But if you have a tornado warning, currently it's like a polygon, correct? And it shows you where the tornado could go. Then they'll adjust that halfway through their warning to cut the polygon down or reshape it to direct where the storm might be going. With the FATSITS program, they're working on, working on having a constantly changing direction of polygon to kind of constantly update where the storm's going to be. So that was one idea that they had too, that they feel would be of much importance to the public and helping, ultimately save lives, but giving the public a constant idea of where the storm is going and what they could be doing. So, that was what they were presenting. I think a lot of the feedback from some of the social scientists, I believe, I think, Gina, you were mentioning that perhaps we should flip the question around and think about, well, do we need more lead time for tornadoes? Do we need to give the public more time? And is that the real essential questions we should be looking at, or is there something else that we should understand too? And it comes back to, what do the people want? What are the end users? Like, how are they going to use the information? And really make the project as beneficial as it possibly can be, but really kind of going back to the beginning and really thinking about what we're trying to solve here. And that kind of gave some feedback from the conference that I thought was really interesting. So, Gina, if you want to take that point and kind of go off of that.
Yeah, sure. So I raised a couple interesting points, and the wonderful thing is having some time to sort of reflect on the thoughts I had at that meeting and have a second chance sort of at communicating some of them. And I want to be clear, I think that we do need to continue to advance the science of meteorology, not just the science of social science. So I'm not saying it's an either or. Both need to advance. What I do think needs to happen, though, is that I think we need to see society advance where we focus our science. So, in other words, if stakeholders aren't asking, let me step back. We often say, we have this really cool thing we'll build. If we build it, they'll come. And I like to describe that kind of as a transmission view of communication, sort of an old school way of thinking. I'll build it, I'll communicate it to you, you will listen, and beautiful things will happen in society. And I often relate that to, if you look back in Weather Service history, where did we come from as an institution, as an organization? We came from the military, really, right? We had the Weather Bureau before the Weather Service, and prior to that, it was mostly forecasters within or embedded in the Army, Navy, right? So we were protecting our soldiers, and it wasn't until people started realizing that there was a larger societal benefit to this type of information, these types of warnings, that it sort of became more of a public communication. It's a really interesting history within our community when we think about weather and communication together. And so I don't know whether the probabilistic hazard information approach or the FATSITS approach is the way to go. It might be. And to that I say, let's explore it, right? Let's do our due diligence and let's research it. But one of the things that really caught me at this conference, something that I found out, and I must admit I was surprised. So I love my phone. I'm monitoring it so I can look at Facebook if anyone's commenting on our group, so we can invite them to the page. I have my Radar Now app on here. I also probably have other things on here to get my weather alerts. And I found out that, first of all, WEA, so the Wireless Emergency Alerting System, right, that FEMA uses, those are county-based warnings on your phone. County, not polygon, county. And then I found out that a lot of weather apps also still use county-based warnings. Now, I think there are a variety of reasons for perhaps why they're still using county-based warnings. One, perhaps, reason that was shared with me, and I don't know the validity of it, so it's perhaps not the only option, but that the way apps work in the world is you need advertisements on apps, right? And so in order for people, you need so many people on your app's page to get a number of clicks. And so bringing people to a warning page that has an advertisement to it, you bring in more people if you're using a county than you would if you used a polygon. And that was posed to me as a reason for private sector companies maintaining the county warnings. Now, there may be technical reasons, there may be a myriad of other reasons, and valid ones. But one of the things that I really questioned was the National Weather Service as an agency is tasked with, yes, producing life-saving forecasts, but we know from some of Rebecca Morse's work, I believe it was her paper, that talked about the end-to-end-to-end process. Right, the idea that if you issue a forecast, we are not the military, the way our public society works. When you issue a warning, we don't necessarily hear it. If we hear it, we don't necessarily understand it. If we understand it, we don't necessarily process it. And even if we do process it, we don't necessarily take action. There's a whole big psychological approach and even sociological approach, depending upon how many people you're talking about, with how we respond to weather information. And my concern is that we went to polygon-based warnings. This is one concern I have about sort of the future of this research. We went to polygon-based warnings in 2006, and yet we don't really even know how that works on the ground because it doesn't seem like the polygons are making it to the ground in terms of the way our phones function. And so my concern is that we place so much emphasis on the first part of the forecast, which is what new forecast approach can we put in, but we don't totally follow it through to the end-to-end process to study, well, did our change actually make an impact on the ground? And we're almost 10 years into polygons, and now we're going to consider something else. And maybe the considering something else is worth it. Perhaps it's so much better. Again, I'm here just to throw out, objective, research questions. I don't have the answers. But the question for me is, if we're truly going to start integrating the structure of meteorology with social science, then we also need to do that in terms of where we prioritize our research for forecasting to make sure that where we're prioritizing will also perhaps gain us the most response. So I'll leave that for food for thought and maybe allow others to sort of comment and chime in.
All right, I'll jump in on that. I've seen talks about facets a couple times at conferences. Unfortunately, I've been kind of out of the conference loop for a couple of years, but I've been to like the broadcast and communication conference in 2013 in Nashville. One thing I want to mention about that, especially since I see Dr. Eosco commenting on here on the Google page.
With us in spirit.
Getting back to Min's. What's that?
I said Susan is with us in spirit.
Yes, and commenting. As Min was talking about getting people talking together more, and that was one of the great things about the original his workshops, is you were with the same people for over a week who had really different backgrounds, and it just allows you to do so much more than you can at a conference over a couple of days where like the 15-minute talks. But one thing we did with Susan is she led a panel where just everyone who showed up in the room got to talk together, and broadcasters and also some social scientists and other people. So that was something that I would like to see more of at conferences. I think maybe that was one of the things that Min might be getting at. As far as facets, and again, it's been a couple years since I've seen a presentation of it, but it's been brewing around for a while, and kind of what you're saying, Gina, with the polygons, there are things about them we don't understand about how they're interpreted, or maybe they're not interpreted in the way that the meteorologists expect that they will be or want them to be. And from what I've seen of facets, I get the impression that it's another level of more complication that could be more confusing when you start talking about the probabilities of more things, when people aren't interpreting, putting the polygon on the box on there aren't interpreting it the way that meteorologists want it to be. If you look at some studies like colleagues of mine at USC, for example, they'd ask people, here's where you are, here's where the warning is, are you scared, what are you going to do? And the answers aren't always what you'd think. So I think for something like facets and what I've seen of it, this grid-based probability measure, it seems like it's a more useful tool for the meteorologists and maybe the public at large. Like I wouldn't be comfortable showing people, like, here's your box of probability, here's your grid of probabilities. But maybe it's been updated in ways that I haven't seen too much.
I think it's an intricate project that's even beyond that. I mean, I think that they've got a very interesting, well thought out plan. How that's going to move into research and then into potentially operations. I still think it's in the minds of brilliant people right now, for the most part. But I know, and Susan had commented as well, I know there are some social scientists involved, and I believe that there are people sort of observing. I'm trying to read Susan's comments too.
Yeah, she made a comment about that.
So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are working on it. I think what's interesting, and I think this is such a neat challenge for our community, is that the Weather Service in some ways is kind of this amazing community gatekeeper, community leader for how to do warnings differently. Although I think the private sector is too, but again, it's that proprietary issue is I don't know how they do all their warnings because some of it might be specific to their clients, right? So, and I'm not one of their customers, or direct paid customers at least. So I don't know. They may have a really innovative approach, but I just don't know it because I can't see it, right? Which it's a pro and con of having this really intricate public-private enterprise that we have in the United States. And I emphasize that because the United States really is pretty different in how we do weather communication compared to other places, which I think just means we have more opportunities for research questions, maybe, on the social science end at least. But I think my bigger question for the Weather Service folks is that when they change something, you change it within this one organizational structure, but this structure sits within this huge circle called weather communication, which consists of private sector weather industry, your more traditional TV weather, so broadcast meteorologists, of which perhaps Weather Channel, Weather Nation, some of your TV stations, I think even AccuWeather has a station. So you've got weather industry, broadcast meteorology, you've got weather blogs. We have so many other ways to get weather information that I think, even 30 years ago, if the Weather Service changed a way to produce warnings, it kind of just trickled through. But now, given an amazingly complex society and a kind of awesomely complex weather enterprise, when you change it in one place, it doesn't necessarily happen in all places. And so when your end goal is to protect lives, to save lives, protect property, you really have to study that whole, I mean, this is my bias, I feel that you need to study the whole communication network. But now perhaps that's because my PhD is in communication, so I'm a little biased with wanting to look at that whole system. But I think it's important to look at the system because when you think about saving those lives, we don't know where those people on the ground are getting the information in the system, and therefore we don't know how one change in one perhaps very important structure of the system, we don't know how that one change trickles down to action on the ground. And so that's sort of my, if I would say a long-term goal for the weather, social science, societal impact community would be to talk more about that big system and how we all see ourselves fitting and how we can find research questions to sort of help answer those questions.
I just have a couple things going back to Gina's discussion on the county versus polygon based. I don't know if any research exists, but I was curious if maybe like the general public or individuals know where they live at in their county? Like, do they know if the polygon is splitting the county in half, which side they're on? So that could be something to think about as well as involving that particular argument.
Yeah. So what I'll say, this is just what I know, that the companies that do use the polygons, you don't have to figure out that you're in it. They tell you that you're in it. So in other words, if I have a text message that goes off here, so now I know if I get, say, a flash flood warning for via WIA or a tornado warning via, I immediately now, because I'm, say, maybe a weather savvy or the Weather Channel show up, I'm a weather geek, right? I know that I may or may not be in that warning because that's county-based. So now, rather than taking action, now I definitely have to confirm. I need to get more sources. And I'll go to the radar map and look at where the polygon is over it, and I'll see whether I'm in or out of it. There are other companies, I believe there are a couple, Weather Call and I think maybe Barron Services, where in the text message you'd get from their app, they just tell you you're in it. The same way you'd get it from WIA, except they're doing it based on the polygon. You wouldn't actually have to figure it out. Although I like to see it. I'm a visual person myself, so I like to see it.
The second thing was going back to facets and the community meeting. There was Min and I talked about this a bunch of times after each day because it continued to build. But NOAA presented a bunch of new products that they're scheduling to come out with, and there's two things within facets. They said there was like 46 some large number of sub projects that had to take place before facets could even begin to be operationalized. And so then they started introducing like Warn on Forecast and like Impact Catalog and all these different things. So I was curious if are they underneath facets or are they different alongside of it? And if so, how are they all going to communicate with one another or be involved with one another so that they can work together? I guess that's my big question. So I don't know if you know anything, Gina, or if anyone else has any ideas on that, but
This is about
it's a big question.
The impacts-based catalog.
Yeah.
So this is, gosh, we should have a weather service person on this call. So this is what I know from the field. The idea, I think, don't quote me, YouTube land. The idea, I believe, is to have the local weather service offices work with their emergency managers at a very local level within each zone. I think it's zone. Or is it each municipality? Because that could get. So I have questions about how low scale they're getting on this. Are they getting to the town level in New England, or is it more the county level? And I think the zone forecasts are still based on county. The idea would be to work with the emergency managers to understand particular thresholds of threats and put it into this database such that emergency managers could trigger their own warning based on certain thresholds. So I'm going to Ocean City, Maryland this weekend with my girlfriends, my college girlfriends, go Terps, and we have to cross the Bay Bridge. Yes, I'm an East Coaster. The Bay Bridge means the Chesapeake Bay, not San Francisco Bay. We have to go over the Bay Bridge, and as many of you know, depending upon how high these bridges are, they may have slightly nuanced threat levels for winds. So they may have to close based on 40 knots or 50 knots or whatever the threshold is. And the idea is that I think that in this catalog they could come with a list of those particular thresholds. One of the questions I asked about this, and I don't know any more information. I think that's the idea, and it's not just on wind. It's that I believe it's supposed to be kind of on everything, but I'm not entirely certain. One of the things that interests me about this is you could do that with stationary sources very well. So bridge isn't going anywhere, God forbid. It's not going anywhere, right? So that threshold should stay fairly consistent over time. But if, for example, we're trying to think about a threshold for what water level on a gauge is going to trigger an action alert for you. My concern about that, having done and having sort of observed some of these local forecast areas and actually gotten a tour of the coastline from the warning coordination meteorologists and others, the coastline changes a lot, sometimes very dramatically in a very short space, right? So it might just be 1 mile of coastline, but just massive erosion due to either surge or wave action from a nor'easter. And so might that threshold change year to year? I mean, this is kind of a physical science question. And this is where limitations of the social sciences, I don't know if those thresholds would change a lot from year to year. Would it take a few years for those thresholds to change? I just don't know. And the other thing is, when we call it an impact-based catalog, one of the questions I'd love to pose to all of you is, what does it mean to forecast impacts? I think we use that word, but I'm not sure that we all agree what it means. And that's another issue. It's not an issue. It's just a fundamental question I have about an impacts-based catalog. Are we talking about the interaction of weather and things, like a bridge, like a road? Is that an impact? Or are we talking about the combination of a threat with people? Because to me, it's a different impact. So I would like to stop there. So that's what I know about the catalog. But I actually would love to hear your thoughts on what does it mean to forecast impacts. Like, what are your thoughts about what impacts mean?
That's an interesting thought, huh? I never really thought about that. I don't think. I mean, when we think about impact warnings and impact-based warnings, I personally think about how it impacts people. But what you have to really think about, too, is how important it is about infrastructure, about what you're dealing with and how that's going to be impacting the roads, the bridges, buildings, anything like that. And it kind of ties into the idea of what I'll be working on at East Carolina would be infrastructure and coastal infrastructure when it comes to water and wastewater, and how that will be impacted from hurricane, storm surge, sea level rise, and things like that. And so we want to be able to correctly forecast how the event is going to impact those infrastructure, those critical infrastructure entities in each community, because if you don't have a pump to pump out fresh water, or if the water cleaning station shuts down, then you're going to have wastewater and contaminated water, and that leads to a public health risk as well. So these are different ways of thinking that is so great about why we have this panel right now, because we can bring up these ideas that perhaps we have maybe thought about minimally, but now we can actually verbalize and talk about it, because I'm sure I've thought about how a storm or some event would impact infrastructure, but when you say impact-based warnings or things like that, my mind jumps to people and not necessarily to maybe our built or natural environment too. So I think that's actually a very cool point to bring up, that well, hopefully people will start thinking about that as well, because it's just as important. I mean, lives are very important, but then again, we live in these societies where we depend on other things to keep us alive, right? Yeah. So why are those any less important than the impacts on the people too? Yeah. Anybody else?
I can go ahead and talk. Like Minh, my initial thoughts go to people as well, but I'm actually in the middle of a wind perception study right now at here at UGA, and we're finding that there are two like distinct definitions of these wind, like of the National Weather Service wind products. It's either impact-based or wind speed thresholds that they're focusing in on. And the interesting thing about the impact-based is, although it's not like gigantic things like my roof is blowing away, it's the patio furniture is blowing off the porch, or the potted plants are blowing off the porch. It's just these tiny things that they're associating with this, like with this hazard of wind, and not necessarily putting a number to, oh, these winds are at 50 miles per hour or 49 miles per hour, but they're focusing in on, do I need to bolt down my furniture, like that kind of stuff. So it's a different way of thinking about impacts that are affecting everyone, but it's more of like their personal space, how they are interpreting this weather information that's going to impact their life.
And I've actually seen a couple of on-camera meteorologists do that. So they'll say, you know, even if the winds are only supposed to be 20 miles per hour with gusts up to 30, you know, they'll say, you know, you need to do things with things that are on your porch, or make sure that you bring your umbrellas inside or whatever, just, you know, on their own, just to get the message across, because that's, like you said, that's what people care about, is how is it going to impact them, not necessarily, you know, if their roof's going to blow off, if it's not that serious. So, yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, if you can make it relatable to the people, I think a big part of that is communication and communicating that effect and that impact. So like Ashley was saying, if you're on TV and you're telling somebody how, like, if you hold your umbrella, it will become inverted or it will break and fly away because it's going to be that windy, or, you know, if you're wearing a wig, like, it might fly off, like, I don't know, you know, so wig alert, you know, but it's important to be able to communicate that efficiently and effectively, and I think that is important in what meteorologists will be doing and are continually doing and are getting a lot better at doing. If you look back maybe 10, 20 years, you know, it's a continually updating and changing environment where we have to be able to properly communicate. And do we have issues right now? Sure we do, you know, but we're getting a lot better at addressing them and communicating them, and hopefully people will see the strides that we've been making and will completely like try to understand where we're coming from as well. And I'm going to take a quick moment to introduce you guys to Michelle,
Yes.
who joined our Google Hangout. Michelle, how are you? No, I bet. She just had a night class, so she came in a little late, but that is okay. Michelle, if you could just give everyone a quick blurb about yourself, just introduce yourself and you know, where do you go to school, what do you study, and some of your interests maybe.
Sure. Actually, I just started the PhD program down here in the University of South Florida, so I just had my first class. That was exciting. I'm going to still be focusing on hurricanes and the suppression of hazards. I'm going to work with Jennifer Collins here, so she doesn't do as much of the social science, but there are a lot of people here that do. So I'm hoping to really expand that portion of what I want to know. Definitely some new classes on that front, but kind of going on what you guys were saying, the thing that I've noticed, at least moving down to Florida, within the first couple of weeks, I mean, the amount of flooding in the roads, I mean, every day so far I've gotten alerts just saying like, oh, these roads are closed because no one can get through. So I think that's something that I hadn't experienced in other places so much, and learning how they deal with that down here has been interesting so far.
Great, thank you. So how do you feel that they are dealing with that situation in Florida, besides getting those alerts? Like, are you getting them like mobile alert telling you roads are closed due to flooding?
Yeah. I had to sign, well, through different things. When I first got down here, I followed the police department. So they actually send me notices. But other than that, like, you don't watch TV or something, like, driving around, you would not know if until you really came upon something if the roads closed or flooded. So
Gotcha.
I thought that was a little bit interesting. Maybe there might be something that people can sign up for, but I haven't been introduced to it yet. Other than the police department,
Gotcha.
through Facebook, they will send me things. That's pretty cool.
Gotcha.
Just a point of clarification. I'm having a tough time hearing you. I don't know if your microphone can get any closer to you.
Yeah, I can't hear you very well.
I can hear, like, I can make out the gist of what you're saying, but I'd love to hear you more. For some reason, you sound really far away.
Weird. I think my microphone, this laptop, I think they actually put it somewhere on the bottom. So
weird.
it's really, that's the only complaint on both my.
That's a little bit better.
Okay, my volume and I believe the microphone are actually located underneath, which doesn't make any sense to me.
You sound a little bit better though.
It's better.
Yeah, because you guys also sound like a little muffled, but I'm used to it at this point.
And remind me, what school are you at?
The University of South Florida.
And the degree you're getting?
It'll be a geography geosciences. They just merged, so it'll still be a PhD in geography, but they're technically a geosciences department right now.
Awesome. Awesome. Congratulations. That's wonderful.
And I just finished up at Alabama. So.
Awesome.
Kind of going off of what Michelle was talking about, and it kind of ties in with what we talked about at the AMS Community Meeting, the efforts in Wyoming for the DOT signs. When there's winter storm events, they use it a lot. But when you're driving on the roadway, they'll have those flashing DOT signs telling you, like, an accident is ahead, or tell you of something on the roadway. I know in Georgia they use them to tell you how many fatalities are on the roadway and to get you to drive more safely. So they've been doing things in Wyoming and I believe Utah, talking about the weather impacts on people on the roadway. So if you're driving through Wyoming and they're forecasting a winter event to happen maybe, let's say, on Friday, they'll put up a sign telling you, on Friday we're expecting, snow, drive safely, slow down, etc., etc. It's a quick message because those signs can't really say much anyway, but the way they develop that message is really terse, but it gets the message across to people. Especially in Wyoming, I believe they said 80% of the people driving in Wyoming are semi-tractor trailers. So they're probably driving from another state and just driving through Wyoming to get where they're getting to. So they may or may not be used to the conditions you get in Wyoming. Sometimes you can have a really steep grade on the roadway. And if you get a little bit of snow or ice, it creates a completely, really, really dangerous situation. So they're testing out these signs and figuring out what works, what doesn't work. For the most part, these signs are getting the message across to motorists. But one situation they talked about in Wyoming that occurred, I believe, in April, was there were two winter weather events that were happening, I think 2 days apart from one another. There was a bigger winter snowstorm event happening on like a Friday, but there was a smaller winter event that would be dumping like an inch or two of snow happening on Wednesday. So then the DOT and the folks opted to not warn about the smaller event, but go ahead and just warn about the more bigger impending winter storm event on Friday. But what they found out from the pileup that they had in Wyoming was that their failure not to warn motorists about the first perceived smaller storm didn't directly trigger the pileup, but it probably had an influence on people not being as careful and thinking that the big winter storm is happening on Friday. This one isn't something we should worry about. But because of those two events happening so closely to one another, they realized it was time to think about how they could get that information across about two events happening relatively close to one another that clearly pose a threat to travelers and humans driving on the roadway in Wyoming. So those were interesting points, and I like the idea of them using those DOT signs. And I believe in Oklahoma they're doing it too, for tornado or severe weather or flash flooding as well. So kudos to the people that are trying these new ways, because if you're thinking about it, you're on the roadway, you're driving, you shouldn't be checking your phone for a text alert. That's probably not a good idea. Some have radio, some don't. Some listen to the radio, some do not. So the only real way, to make sure you kind of get to those people, and even that's not a sure thing either, but having those signs on the roadways telling you, at least when you're driving through them, you can kind of see them. And that it's another way, adding to the arsenal of ways to communicate to people on the roadway, which is good, I think.
Yeah, and going back to what Michelle said, I'm from Virginia, where flash flooding, we just think like small creeks are going to overflow and it may get into your yard, things like that. But in Tucson, when they say flash flooding, they really mean flash flooding. They close roads all the time during the monsoon season, and their drainage system here for the roads is absolutely terrible. I tried to get somewhere in Tucson, with directions for my phone because it's brand new to me. I didn't know where I was going, and I had to turn around 3 times because there were flooded roads that were flooded from washes just from a thunderstorm that maybe didn't hit exactly the road I was on, but maybe just a couple miles up the road that influenced the wash. And they actually have this rule here in Tucson that they have a bunch of, I guess it's usually during the monsoon season, they'll have these signs that just say flood area or dip in the road, look out for a flood. And they keep these out all the time just because the thunderstorms and precipitation are so scattered, especially during the monsoon season. And if you get stuck in a flooded area and it had that flooded road sign, like watch out, don't enter when flooded, they'll rescue you, but you actually have to pay a fine because you went through the road and you didn't
Wow.
listen to the road signs. So
Wow.
I thought that was really interesting because in Blacksburg or Danville, where I'm from, it's not. I mean, it is a big deal, but to me, I just think flash flooding, it's not really a big concern, but here it is a really, really huge problem. And I think today we had, I don't think it was necessarily a severe thunderstorm, but they had a school bus and a couple cars that got stuck in a flooded roadway, and then they had power lines go on top of them. And this kind of stuff happens all the time during the monsoon season, and I assume it's because, most of the time it's dry here, and then once we get all that precipitation stuff, it just overtakes everything and it influences everybody's day-to-day errands and things like that. So it has a huge influence here, which was a big eye-opener for me when it comes to flooding.
And isn't that one of the challenges that, we use the same phrase, we use flash flood warning for that, but I've lived in numerous places, Boston, DC area. I live in Arlington right now. I'm in Arlington right now. Let's see, Ithaca, New York, that has a lot of streams, lakes, in Oklahoma. And the thing is that you use the same term to warn, but when you've lived in multiple different places, it doesn't mean the same thing. In Ithaca, we've had flash flood warnings, and fortunately for where I was, my perspective of the storm was that it was contained in the creeks around us, and they were indeed very high. We were fine. And the roads that I was going on were going uphill, so I knew it would be okay. Not a laughing matter, though, because you don't know exactly which road is going to have water or which, downhill road's going to turn into a new creek, right? So that's some of the challenges. And like you said, if you're in a drier area where you might have, I know there's a scientific name for that ponding, like the bleeding of water on soil that's really dry. I know there's some scientific name for that. I can't think of it at the moment. But yeah, so out in Oklahoma, if it hadn't rained for a couple months, and all of a sudden you get a deluge, unfortunately, like they did, gosh, was it this spring? It was just this past spring that they had crazy flooding in Norman, in Oklahoma City, I think.
Yeah.
So that's like a whole different situation. And it's the same thing for me in severe thunderstorms. Severe thunderstorms in D.C. were, whoa, they seemed far worse than the Boston area. And then the D.C. storms looked like a joke when I moved out to Oklahoma, just because they have different structures. The environment is producing something that's different, even though we're still basing it on criteria for each area. There's still some consistency. Although I think the thresholds are a little bit different office to office to capture some of that localized nuance. But from a public perspective, it seems so different. And how do you communicate that a flash flood here is different than a flash flood somewhere else? That's hard. Again, that's just, to me, it's one of those challenges that I don't think there's a real easy solution to that. I think it's just a communication challenge. Should have asked a question so more people would have chimed in. One thing we didn't negotiate was the end time for this, or is there an end time for this?
I mean, we've got things to do, but we can keep going until we have exhausted all the topics. Castle, do we have any other topics we want to talk about?
I have some that I kind of want to ask the other WASIS students, and Gina, you can chime in too. So I'm stretching here, but my goal is I really want to have an AMS graduate fellowship that kind of focuses in on the societal impacts or makes some kind of effort towards going in that direction, since it's becoming such a big portion of the discipline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, keep going.
Okay. So last year I had one of the AMS graduate fellowships. I guess host or the person that donated money was the AMS 21st Century campaign. And so their slogan and topic is kind of bringing the society and the information to the public and combining the weather with policy and weather and all these different social sciencey topics. So I approached Dr. Shepard with the idea and asked him if he thought it would be something that could possibly happen in the future. And he told me to actually go talk with Keith, I believe is his name, and actually propose this to him. I'm wondering what everyone thought about the idea. I know it's kind of a long shot because a lot of people aren't thinking or they may be afraid that the social sciences may be taking over the discipline too much. I've heard that from some people. So I just wanted to know your thoughts. And if you thought, what's your idea? Take it away.
I like the idea. Could you say who Dr. Shepard said you should talk to? Because it seemed to cut out right when you said the name.
Yes, let me double check before I... Since
okay.
This is, let's see. It is Keith Setter.
Okay.
Oh, Keith, the executive director.
Yeah, the executive director of AMS.
Yeah. So he told me to speak with him and kind of give him like just a brief proposal about maybe not the AMS 21st Century campaign solely focusing in on societal impact, but maybe making sure to look at them as potential participants or winners of the fellowship, because I think it would be a good aspect to start including, especially since their slogan is so involved with societal impacts and bringing society and weather together. I think they would be the best sponsor for this approach. So, any other thoughts?
I'm sure I could have plenty, but I would love to hear from others.
I don't know, it might be kind of awkward to talk about it.
You remember, this is recorded.
Oh yeah, and it's recorded. No, I also applied for the fellowship, and I was unfortunately I didn't get it, and that's fine. But I want to make sure that they were looking at the people that had ideas in social science to at least get awarded one, because somebody in our field, you know, as a student like myself, we have to be able to fund an opportunity for somebody to go and research that idea. And it comes down to, if you give the fellowship to everyone that's doing a physical science, meteorology related topic, not to try to undervalue those ideas as well, but if you don't have any room for social science related research in meteorology, and perhaps that funding could have impacted someone going into a school that they really wanted to do the research they really wanted to, then would that be detrimental to our movement of getting students involved with social science and meteorology, to get the ball continually rolling from generation to generation, instead of, you know, we keep on saying that we are valuing the social science aspect of meteorology, and that the new generation is coming up, and we have a lot of people that really want to do it, but if the funding still is not there in situations like this, where a fellowship may not be awarded to someone who's doing one thing because one line of work is not seen as equivalent to another. And I'm not saying that's the way they see it, but that could be something that could be coming up, where people are like, well, it's hard to compare the two because they're both so different, but they both contribute a lot to meteorology. So it would be nice to ensure a way that the social science people are not being overlooked, kind of, you know. And I don't know how to fairly do that because you can't really, you know, they look at every application and see how everyone stacks up against each other, but you can't say for one that, okay, well, they're doing a social science thing, so they're not as important as, you know, this one. You know, it's all subjective, so I don't know how they do that, but it'd be nice to be able to ensure that at least one a year maybe can get one of those fellowships. How many are there, Castle, per year?
It varies between years, but there's normally between 9 and 12.
Okay. So maybe have some way to maybe like the AMS 21st Century campaign to maybe fund one or two or something like that, just to ensure that there's somebody in that realm of social science is allowed the opportunity to continue in their research past the undergraduate level. So that's something we can talk about.
And I should say I'm actually a previous recipient of one. The 2006-2007 year was the first year of my master's degree in communication, and I received one, and I believe it was an AMS fellowship sponsored by NSF. I believe that was my particular one. Kim Cloco also received one same year. Her master's was interdisciplinary meteorology, so she did focus on a variety of issues, and she ended up having very much a social science bent to her master's degree, and then of course she went on to get a PhD in geography. So she's another example. So there are some examples of this, of seeing it, but you know, I think it's a worthwhile discussion to have. And I think too, to anyone who is afraid that the social sciences are going to take over meteorology, you can't have social science without meteorology, because we're, you know, I mean, what we want to do is marry them. You know, like, you know, it's weather and society, and for too long they've separate circles. And what I would like to see, you know, this nice Venn diagram here, where we've, you know, they're married, they're linked together, and it's not one or the other. And I think that the constructive criticism that I believe the social science community has given is that for too long, the only emphasis has been on meteorology. What we're saying now is not that we shouldn't emphasize meteorology. It's that I want to emphasize meteorology here, and I want to bring, you know, society and the studies of society at the same level and integrate them together. And that's so anyone that has any concerns about that, I am definitely not a social scientist who's saying God with meteorology. No, I mean, that's I own weather mugs. I mean, you know, you know, the folks who are in the social sciences that are in this community, we're in it in part because we too love meteorology. We're just studying a slightly different dimension of it that takes the science of meteorology and combines it with the science of something else, be it psychology, in my personal case, communication, which is interdisciplinary, but I like to think of myself as a communication scholar. I'm not a psychologist. So I see it as a blend of the two. I mean, maybe we need another metaphor here. I like cookies, but I can't really come up with a cookie metaphor. You know, an Oreo cookie, it's got, you know, 2 cookie sides and it's got the cream in the middle. You need 2 cookie sides. So, you know, maybe meteorology is one side of the cookie and the other side is the social science, and the cream in the middle hopefully is society responding to both. I don't know. I don't know. But I think the fellowship idea, it's a really interesting point. And whether or not that they'll prioritize one each year, I don't know, because you may also want to think about, I'm trying to think about other areas that perhaps have also been perceived as underfunded in our community. So we think of people having meteorology degrees as winning those fellowships, but geography is actually a physical and a social science, depending upon how you study it. So we have had some folks who've done geography who have been recipients. And what about hydrology, studying an aspect of flooding that isn't necessarily specifically meteorology? It's like a cousin to meteorology, but it's more on the hydro side. Or for that matter, someone who wants to study, I'm probably going to get some terminology wrong here, I don't know, some kind of data assimilation of NASA satellite information, which could have other benefits beyond just meteorology. You know, so I think the idea of the fellowships is to identify potential gaps in research in all of these areas, and then perhaps prioritize that gap that particular year with the students who have applied. I don't know. I mean, maybe we need a little more transparency that it's okay if you're a social scientist to apply, with the contingency that, you know, you should make sure your thesis is studying something in the domain of a social science and meteorology. So I'll end that rant there. I go on rants.
I wouldn't say that was a rant. I'd say that was a well-developed idea of opinion, so that's not a rant. That's a good thing.
Yeah, Castle, you should check a message that Susan left on the Google
Dr.
page.
Jasco mentioned that, so you should talk to her definitely.
Yeah.
Wait, what? Sorry, what?
Make sure you saw it. I would say also, you know, just think of other avenues, other societies, other funding opportunities out there, because I've had this impression for a while that, you know, we keep talking about how important social science is, you know, the role it needs to play in meteorology, and I hear like a lot of excitement, a lot of talking about it, but then when it comes time to fund more of that, there still doesn't seem to get as much attention in terms of actual funding we want, as opposed to just people talking being excited about it, saying, yeah, we need to do that, and then it's time to fund the programs, and it's not quite there as much as we'd like.
Yeah, I think I can speak a little to that. I don't work for the National Weather Service, but I obviously have a lot of friends and colleagues who do. And the type of change that we're talking about is systematic change, institutional change.
Yeah.
Let me think of another word. It takes time. And I think some are frustrated with how slow change is happening. What I will say, though, is there are some funded projects, perhaps not enough, you could argue, perhaps not enough money. You know, I think, too, that and this is why I raised the question, you know, sort of early on about one of the questions I had coming out of the summer community meeting is, you know, we tend to look at the Weather Service as if they are the only agency who should fund this, and indeed they should be a major contributor. If this is something they want, then they should consider that integration, and I think they are. I think that's the really good thing is, like I said, I see this as I see us really being in the fringe of something awesome, and I think we just have to have patience for it. And so to that, I share my excitement with you, but I do think systematic changes is slow, and that, again, that comes from NSF, also the National Science Foundation, does fund a lot of social science, and you should tell your congressman about it. You know, NSF is a really good agency, and there are so many folks who are doing some amazing research that is funded by NSF, where those results definitely impact the weather sort of risk communication domain. I think another thing that, and again, I don't have an answer for this, and I'm not criticizing anyone, I think it's just another challenge. We have some grand challenges. How do we transfer social science research that has already been conducted in the fields of communication, geography, psychology, sociology, economics, and how do we begin to think about integrating that into operations that are already ongoing? And I don't think there's a clear standard for it. I can't even think of another industry, a context where there's a clear standard. I don't think there is. And I think what we're experiencing right now are growing pains within the National Weather Service, within NOAA, within the weather enterprise. Like I said, I don't want to keep pointing fingers to just our government. I think we have a weather industry that could also play a really wonderful role. Our broadcast meteorologists, they're not PhD comm scholars, but gee, they're comm practitioners. You know, so in some ways you could think of them as practitioners of social science in some ways, right? So I think there's a variety of ways of sort of pointing the finger and saying, hey, why are you participating in these conversations? And how could we bring more people to the table to think about how we can integrate faster, more efficiently, more collaboratively, more collegially? I don't know. I mean, and maybe we're already doing it collegially, and maybe we're already collaborating. So maybe there are some things we just need to continue doing wonderfully, but perhaps there are other areas where we need to improve. And I think it's important to get the next generation involved in thinking about these questions, because I think they're going to be here for a long time. I think even 10 years ago, I thought these were pretty simple. Maybe not simple, but I thought, gee, just go ahead and implement it. Go ahead and change that. Just go ahead and stick that in the forecast, you know. And then, you know, I got a little older. I have a little more experience. I kind of matured a little bit more. And you realize that what you thought was a simple thought at age 22, all of a sudden 10, 15 years later, you're going, whoa, this is complex and it's challenging. And how can we have this kind of dialogue together to continue to think about these questions and perhaps solve some of the answers? And I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, cool. One other thing that I had on the just list of topics is we're trying to plan for the National AMS Conference because we want to have WSIS students be kind of a integral part of the student conference, because we want to get our name out there more and let people know that we are here to talk about these things. So I was curious about what ideas you may have. So Min and myself talked about having a table at the student conference, like during the poster session. You know how some colleges have tables, and we talked about maybe having buttons and something to draw people over and just let people know that we are here. We have a Facebook page. Hopefully this chat can continue once a month. We can get more people involved with it. I just want to get the word out that this is something that is around and that people can join in on. So any thoughts or comments about potential ways to get people to come or anything like that?
I'll jump in on just a piece of history on that. I think last year, the last couple years, might have been the first year we didn't have one. The AMS policy program used to partner with the Societal Impact Program at NCAR to do a joint table at the career fair, and it was very well received. We had lots of interest, lots of great discussion. We talked about, at the time, when WSIS was still a workshop, we talked about the WSIS workshop. We talked about the Summer Policy Colloquium, which, by the way, if any of you are graduate students, that you can apply for funding for the Summer Policy Colloquium and get your mind blown from the point of view of how our policy system works on the weather science end. Really, really fascinating. And I think it's time for the next generation to kind of take over that booth, because I think it's more than just, hey, come to these workshops. It's really about, hey, do you have these interests? There are these like-minded people. There are graduate schools. Look, we have alum from all these different universities. So I encourage you to take that over and make sure you have lots of people to staff it. I think that's a great idea. I say we reinvigorate that. If it didn't happen last year, which I'm not sure it did, I think we gotta bring that back.
Show of hands, who in the panel is planning on going to New Orleans for AMS?
I'm working on it.
Yeah, me too. I'm working on it too. I gotta get funding somehow.
The student funding.
I probably won't. Well, I don't know if I'll be able to. Like I said, I've been kind of out of the loop with
Sure, yeah.
going to conferences, which is too bad because I really enjoy them. Just things have been very messy.
No, I feel it. What were you saying, Michelle?
If I do end up going, I'm waiting on the travel grant to open.
Travel grant open?
Going, I would definitely want to help either organize or staff and anything like that. So let me know. Well, I guess I'll let you know if I'm going.
I think it's definitely, I mean, from my experience at AMS in Atlanta and New Orleans, or in Phoenix the past 2 years that they had the annual meeting, just talking with people about, hey, what area of weather are you interested in? I found so many people that have that societal impact aspect when just talking to them in conversation. Last year, I believe, Eve brought buttons for What Is, so we wore the buttons on our lanyards and we were handing them out, and people that generated the buzz during the meeting. So little things like that, where people just don't know that that opportunity exists for them to have a group of people who we can all kind of come together and talk about these issues. We are not those misfit toys anymore that Gina referred to. Our island is growing. We're becoming more of a a more established colony of folks. But there's so many of them out there, and all it takes is the conversation to get them involved and to get them the opportunity to understand that we have, whether the students, and there's definitely a nurturing, fostering environment that we want people to know about. So that table, I think, will definitely help. There's so many students that go to the student conference, and I think that'll definitely give the visibility we need to get those people involved too.
What's neat too, that the buttons were great. I know a lot of the universities, they'll bring stickers for the university and stick them on your name tag. It might be fun to have a sticker too, and that way you can stick it on your name tag and it's just there for the rest of the conference to see.
Mm-hmm.
That could be another thing. We could. I don't know what what would be on the sticker yet. We'd have to think of some emoticon of society and weather. People in a cloud. I don't know.
The art of conference going. There's like little things that you can do now, like schools put stickers, some people wear buttons, some people have like the different little ribbons on their name tag. There's like an art to understanding what all you could possibly wear at a conference, right? So I think that would be a pretty cool idea too, just to get the people involved, and you see that and that spurs the conversation. Hey, what's that sticker for? Oh, I'm in this was a student group and we do this and that, and like, wow, I didn't know that. Can I join? Sure. And then we bring more people in. I think the Facebook student page for that was definitely a good starting point. We're getting those discussions, maybe not as often as we'd like to, but as we get more people, I think it'll start developing naturally, kind of like the What Is page is right now, with so much discussion going on there. We're starting at a more elementary level, so then we want to get people comfortable enough to pose a question, pose a thought, and know that there won't be any not backlash, but we won't bite you. We're all here to help each other out and answer each other's questions. And I think that is that kind of nurturing environment that we want to provide for people that are just starting off in this field.
And I agree, because for so long I didn't really know where to even begin to look. So I don't want people coming up to have that feeling. I want there to be a database or something out there that lets people know we're here to talk, we can help you, we can help pick graduate schools. I think another thing on our list is to eventually have a graduate school list of potential advisors or different programs that offer societal impact options. So that is something that's also kind of in the works as well. So anyone else have any other ideas for the booth or different things that could draw people over?
Yeah, I'd love to hear if there's something else we can offer, or a different type of session, or like, what do you all need or want?
I remember hearing talk about the grad school list before, and this is going to be like a series of talk of Google Hangouts, right? That's kind of the idea.
Yeah, at least once a month, I think.
Okay, cool. There's one thing that could be helpful would be like grad school and kind of early career discussion. I don't know if those would be better to separate those, if there's enough material there, or to have them combined into one, because I'm at the point where I can offer advice about grad school, but I'm also at this at starting a career that's kind of different than maybe what I've been envisioning. So I'm kind of at that point just getting out of grad school, so I can offer advice, and I'm also looking for advice. So I had a feeling maybe that would be a future topic.
Definitely. I think this Google Hangout was a great idea, and we're going to continually figure out how it works. We got through the technological issues earlier tonight, but I think it worked out pretty well, and we have a pretty good following of people watching. And as we start refining it more, we can have set topics, and kind of maybe we can even let people know ahead of time what topics we'll be covering, and that way people will be like, oh, I know for sure what they're going to be talking about, let me tune in. Because maybe this time around they're like, well, I don't know what they're going to talk about, should I watch? Maybe if we give them the idea of what we will be talking about and be, have that idea, then that will generate more viewers, and we can have more people participate as well. And that panel idea that Robert was talking about, I think, would be really beneficial, because a lot of people are entering that realm in their career where they are starting up graduate schools.
Yeah, we could. This was impromptu. Minh, Castle, and I were at the summer community meeting, and we wanted to follow up. And we said, oh, let's do a Google Hangout. And I said, I could do it. Apparently I did. And we said, well, gee, should we open it up to more people? Because I bet, this is about society, so people are important. Let's invite more people. And so this was a little impromptu, but yeah, I think if we have some topics each month, and if you don't want me on them, because I'm taking up a slot in the 10 people that can be on it, we can at least organize whoever you'd like to hear from. Maybe there are other experts you'd like to hear from, or maybe other students who took a very similar track and you'd like to have them as the panelists. It doesn't have to be adults. It can be, am I an adult? I guess I am, because I don't know if you're no longer a student or you're an adult. What is the definition of adult? I don't even know. Whatever you all want/need, we want to provide, because we know that not everyone can make the AMS annual meeting, not everyone can make the summer community meeting, and we know that's sad. I missed my first annual meeting. The one, gosh, what location was it? Was it Atlanta? Maybe. It was between Austin and Phoenix.
Yeah, Atlanta.
Atlanta. I missed Atlanta, and I was sad and depressed and lonely.
Aww.
I needed my people, and I get so much energy from this community. And so what we just thought was, let's try to keep that energy going and keep you going, especially if you're in graduate school. Sometimes you need that little extra motivation to remind you, why am I doing why am I reading the 500 pages this week? Why am I doing it? But you're doing it for a reason, and if we can help sort of remind you of that amazing reason of why you're studying this, then we want to do whatever we can to motivate you. So you tell us what you need, and Minh, Castle, maybe we're like the steering committee for this, and we can sort of just push it month to month with different speakers, or we just keep it informal, but we can just sort of bound the discussion.
Mm-hmm. That sounds good.
I think that sounds like I don't know if clearly this time worked for all of you. I'm about ready to keel over. I'm trying to keep my eyes wide open. But that's because I was up early. But if the time doesn't work or the night doesn't work, and we've got quorum, and the quorum says Wednesday nights are better. This is a democracy, so feel free to speak up, and we'll work it around everyone's schedules.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Awesome.
All right, I'm gonna take a screenshot real quick, because I think it'd be fun. All right. All right, take a second. All right, boom, got it.
Nice.
So yeah, Cass, we're gonna wrap things up in a nice little bow for us.
Sure. This was excellent. I'm really happy that you were all able to join us for this. It was really cool getting to speak to you all, not at a conference, just in an everyday setting, which we don't usually get to do that often. So if you have any thoughts or future topic things, you can just shoot myself or Minh an email.
Sorry.
Yeah. Then we can put together a set of topics for next month and maybe get a theme. Maybe Min could do some kind of graphic or poster advertising.
Sure.
I know that avenue of funness. So perhaps that's a avenue to go down. If you have any other ideas about the National AMS Conference, please feel free to post them. We would love to hear from you. So thank you all, and it was a blast.
Great job, guys. Inaugural one, and we did pretty good.
I'm just trying to get on.
Sit there and smile. Alrighty, guys. Y'all have a good night.
Thanks, you too.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.